Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about the comic book industry, the American comic book industry not being able to do any self-reflection. They're taking no responsibility for the Comicsgate debacle, the nerd wars, the whatever the hell you want to call it, that happened a couple of years ago, and the effects of which are still being felt in the industry today. So we're gonna talk about this because there's an article put up on Comicsbeat by Heidi McDonald, and
when I saw this, I was like, "Are you effing kidding me?"
Yeah. So I'm sorry, it's Albert Fuzeloff.
Right, but it's on Heidi McDonald's.
It's on her site, right? And Heidi, who was complaining that she wasn't getting invited to the Eisners anymore because there's not enough of a demand for comic book journalism. And there's a panel on toxic comic book fans. And we're going to talk about this because first off, before we get into it, I do want to say that I do have a lot of respect for the people on this panel.
Oh, was it a panel or was this people just talking in general?
No, it was a panel. It was a panel of comic book pros. Danny Fingeroth in particular, I like him quite a bit. I've actually done panels with him at Wizard, a couple different Wizard events. I have a hell of a lot of respect for him. Actually, the people involved, this is what's weird about it. The people on this panel are not the people that are causing the problems.
No, but the ones that are own blogs, that are sitting here fan blaming again. It's almost like if people that were, allegedly part of Whisper Networks were going around trying to get certain, pros and veterans canceled to get them out of the way, are suddenly trying to say, oh, no, it's the fans who are toxic, when in reality, it was the people that you were behind the scenes causing the bullshit.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that because it's kind of... it's an interesting situation. What is going to happen is, in hindsight, if anybody cares, because look, let's be honest, the comic book industry right now has been completely decimated, destroyed, hold out. It's not doing good financially. Yeah, there's some good books out there every once in a while, but the industry is pretty much toast, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if in 10 years anybody's really even going to care about this, but the story, the history of it, the official history is going to change, and it's going to be like, these poor people were just minding their own business and they weren't doing nothing wrong, and then these Nazi comic book fans, they decided they were just out of the blue just going to start tormenting people. It is a real shame, and the comic book industry died because all the damn Nazis, and that's not actually what happened.
No.
I mean, are there some people that are taking things too far, threatening people? I'm sure. Don't do that. I'm going to tell you right now. Don't harass people. Don't threaten them. Hell no. Don't do that. We don't condone that here. But you can't go out and say that, and they quote Mark Waid, you can't go out and say that the comic book industry or industry pros were completely blameless when there was a high-profile lawsuit because Mark Waid decided he was going to police the entire industry and decide who got to work in it and who didn't get to work in it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the effects of all of this stuff is still being felt today because a lot of people.
Yeah, but he still gets work.
He still gets work. He said he wasn't going to work because he was too depressed about the election, but he still gets work, right? So let's dive into this. We'll dive into this. Before we get to it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. Guys, you'll get a woohoo if you do.
Woohoo.
Now, here's the thing. Nobody's going to watch this video because I'm going to be honest. Every time we do a comic book video, nobody gives a shit.
It's true.
That is the utter state of comics right now. So basically what we've got are a bunch of people just fighting over the scraps of what's left of the comic book industry. And that's what it feels like. It's really sad. It's really depressing to see, but that's kind of where we're at. Anyway, there was a Whisper Network. This was actually verified. There was a Facebook group where a bunch of editors, professionals, using air quotes, finger quotes here, and journalists like Heidi McDonald would basically collude and try to get people canceled from comics because they were too toxic or whatever, And unfortunately, it had some major real life ramifications for some people because Ed Piskor ended his life, and he was, we could debate, what happened with Ed specifically, but the long and short of it is he took his life He blamed a lot of the people in this Whisper network, and even the comic book media just kind of glossed over it because he was targeted, So a lot of really sketchy, quote unquote, journalism. It's basically a club. Comics is a club. And if you don't belong,
they have to decide. If you go back and over how many years we've been doing this, we have done several videos on it and on how it's a club and there's cult-like behavior and things like that. We've talked about it at length.
Yes, and this is proven. I mean, it's not. Here's the thing. I think a lot of it, on some level, has died down just because of like natural attrition. Like the jobs have dried up. Some people are shutting their mouths because they don't want to be blacklisted themselves. A lot of the people that were causing problems actually kind of got booted from the industry. Again, freelancers, so you don't have to call them, so the phone stopped ringing. But we do have people out there like, again, Heidi McDonald, who participated in this, and she wanted to curate the comic book industry. Allegedly, but they do have screen caps of she was part of it. She was part of it, right? And she would again, if here's what's really scary about this whole thing is that Rich Johnston somehow has become the best reporter reporting almost exclusively on comics now. Rich Johnston, muckraker Rich Johnston.
I know. I was gonna say he was basically like the
yellow journalist.
Acquirer.
Right.
Yeah.
he's like the last man standing because all the other comic book sites, because the traffic isn't there and the interest isn't there, they get dried up, got sold off, got shut down. Rich is still standing, and he's actually doing the journalism. It's crazy. Like if you told me this 5 years ago that he would be the most authoritative voice on comics news at this, I'd be like, what the hell are you smoking?
Yeah, I know, right?
Anyway, so there's a panel at this convention. Doesn't look like a very big convention. And I want to reiterate, I know some of the people because we used to do the scene, right? And I know some of these people and I have a lot of respect for these people. Do not harass or attack any of these people. I do not believe that they were, I'm looking at the names here. No, I don't think any of these people were ever, to the best of my knowledge, ever involved in like actively trying to cancel anybody. And again, Danny Fingeroth, I can't say he's like one of the nicest guys I've ever met in comics ever. Very cool guy. But the narrative is being changed.
Yes, the narrative, yes.
The comic book industry will not take any responsibility for its own. The people that went out there and antagonized fans and tried to get people canceled and tried to get people blacklisted from conventions.
Did fans probably attack, people like these comic people probably in retaliation because they're mad at them wrongly. But a lot of the attacks that these people faced weren't the fans.
Yeah, see, this is where it gets really complicated. And I was thinking about this yesterday when we did the Disney video. Like, sometimes it is the fans. And sometimes I honestly think that these kind of movements, I think sometimes they attract people that aren't actually fans or never really were fans. They're just behind the cause, right? And that becomes kind of more and more apparent, especially you get some people, in the spaces. It's like, yeah, I don't really think you know what the hell you're talking about. So, actual, like, have people taken it too far? I'm sure. Hell, we get threats. It's just the age we're in, the internet age, right? But again, what is concerning about this is when people eulogize the comic book industry and we look back at what killed the comic book industry, they're going to be like, Nazis killed the comic book industry.
Yeah, but that's not what happened. What happened was
not actually what happened.
The people that were in these networks were going out of their way to get comic professionals canceled who didn't basically vote the way they wanted or weren't the right demographic or whatever to get their friends in. And then people were getting like not having work because of it. And then when the fans were mad about the choices and changes and what happened to them, they're trying to turn around and say that it was the fans, but it was never the fans.
Right. And honestly, if you're, how can I put this? If you're actually a fan of something and you actually have some respect for the people behind it, you're not going to usually go on a tear and try to rip them to shreds for no
unless
reason.
unless they attacked first.
Unless they attack
first. Which is usually what happens is some idiot actor, director, whatever, comics person will go out and be calling fans Nazis and don't buy my work then if you don't like it, DeConnick, etc.
Right. And
you have to talk about politics, don't buy work, and then they're like, okay,
they didn't.
Sounds acceptable.
You told them not to, they didn't.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I'm saying. So it's going to be a very complicated situation that's being distilled down to we're the good guys, the fans are the bad guys, and they're all Nazis, and that's not actually what's going on here, right?
No.
So they're talking about how fans used to, and they always have, air grievances about certain things. It used to be write-in campaigns, or you'd see somebody at a convention or whatever, and now because of the internet, people can just say or do whatever with anonymity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about Hal Jordan becoming Parallax. That was a big thing. One More Day was a big thing. Spider Clone. I would hate to have been working at Marvel Comics in the Spider-Man office when the Clone Saga happened. I'm just saying. But they said sharing opinions, whether positive or negative, required time and effort. Because of that, fans had to take time to think and express themselves in a way they'd get attention. Even when irate, they had to be thoughtful, constructive, and civil. Here's the thing. On the other side of it, though, too, you can be thoughtful, constructive, and civil, and these people will still call you Nazis.
Right, exactly, because you don't vote the way I want, or you're not agreeing with me. So instead of listening to what you're saying, I'm just going to dismiss you as, a Yahtzee.
Right. Well, speaking of which, here's Mark Waid. So then came the internet and social media. This is what Mark Waid said in an email. Social media has certainly enshittified fandom as much as it has everything else in the 21st century. Well, then get off of social.
He would know all about that, wouldn't he?
Get off of social media, Mark. Actually, Mark Waid has, I'm going to be honest, Mark Waid himself, just Mark Waid, has done more damage for comic book fan relations, I think, than any other comic book creator in recent history.
But he's going to say everybody else is shit. It's like
he's going to say everybody else is.
Are constantly having political meltdowns and acting like a big giant baby.
Right. And he said he can't even write superheroes anymore because he's so depressed about Trump, but he's still writing superheroes.
Right.
So there's always been brickbat throwers out there, but when they had to actually write a letter and buy a stamp, you didn't hear from them as much. Once all they had to do was open a Twitter account, the horse was loose in the hospital.
Potter kettle there, Mark.
Mark Waid thought he could curate the comic book industry. He wanted to curate it. He wanted to tell people.
Shame if your comics won't get picked up anymore.
Exactly.
If you support certain people.
Exactly. And actually, this situation, and here's where it gets even more complicated on our end. We've heard about negative interactions with Mark Waid. We've actually heard from many people about negative interactions with Mark Waid. We have never had a negative interaction with Mark Waid. He won't even talk to us.
No, but when he wanted us to come on to throw a bet, and he wanted us to help him, and he talked to us on the phone, he was actually, pretty nice. And I was really kind of surprised that he was being a dick. But then I'm hearing from other people who've been around a while, they weren't surprised at all.
I'm gonna be completely honest. The stories I've heard, and the public persona, it just kind of feels like, I think I'm gonna be completely honest. If he's listening, this is, I would tell you this to your face. I think there's some mental issues going on, like dark mental issues. I think he needs to get some help. I'm just saying.
Well, I don't follow him enough to know. So.
I know people who have worked with him, and I guess he can just flip on turn on a dime and rage, and it's like, yeah.
I get mad too, but I usually have
something else going on. You just beat me, and it's all good.
Yeah, all the time.
Punch Kneon in the face. You. The reason we're not on camera is she repeatedly hits me, and I've got bruises.
That's not true. Someone's going to clip this out of context.
No, okay. No, she has never hit me, ever.
Yeah. So why would I? Anyway.
How did we get
here? Let's go back
I don't know. Okay. So look, there was a whole lawsuit because he wanted to curate the comic book industry,
right?
And that's
what so it's tone deaf and ironic that he's making the comments he's making about people,
right?
And basically pissing on fans for things that he himself has done publicly.
All they had to do was open a Twitter account. He spent all day on Twitter ranting about people. He spends all day now on Facebook and Blue Sky ranting about people. It is very ironic. Again, there's no self-reflection. I'm not saying it's all your fault. comic book industry. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you deserved, death threats and shit like that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that if you had kept some of your own people in check earlier, maybe things wouldn't have gotten as bad as they did. Is that fair? Is that a fair? Like if you're an editor or a publisher and you've got a freelancer running at the mouth, speaking on behalf of the company, maybe you should have shut them down. But then again, they're freelancers. What are you going to do?
We had that happen once.
We have had that happen.
Pirates and Princesses, and I had to shut them down. Anyway.
Yeah. So, so then what happened was, because these people, again, as Waid puts it, the horse was loose in the hospital. You let the horses loose in the hospital, and they destroyed.
Is he referring to his mental hospital?
I guess, but they did so much damage. And some of the people that caused the most problems, they're not working in comics anymore. They're not getting phone calls. So they know these people were, they shouldn't have been let off the chain. Right. But the damage is done. And look,
I prefer to call, the comic book hospital, the Fortress of Ineptitude.
The Fortress. There we go. The Fortress of Ineptitude. I could just picture like the Superman theme on a kazoo or something. Fortress of Ineptitude. All right. So this is, let's see. Is this still Mark Waid? Is this whole thing a Mark Waid? Holy shit. I think it is. Yeah. I wrote Mark after reading George R.R. Martin's blog post. Okay. So it said toxicity is growing. It used to be fun talking about our favorite books and films and having spirited debates.
You're not allowed to debate. See, no. See, here's the thing, though. You can't debate anything. You're not allowed to do anything except say it's great and love it, or you are a bigot. There is no debate. And I would argue the reason you can't debate are people like Mark Waid, who were just like so politically pickled that everything is black and white and some political narrative.
Well, that's just it. I mean, again, he's not the one you want to be hearing from for a reasoned take on this, because there are guys out there like Wes from Thinking Critical who are very middle of the road, and they talk about what they like and what they don't like, and you never, they don't want people associating with these YouTubers because they're negative all the time. But you know what I'm saying? It's like that's not the case. Actually, going back and looking at some of the fan publications, the fanzines back in the day, there was negativity there too. You just I think the difference is the YouTubers came in and they had a lot more influence. They weren't prepared. The comic book, just like web comics and all this other, like the comic book industry is living in the dark ages. They were not prepared for the amount of people that would be reached via the platform. And so what they tried to do is discredit a lot of YouTubers and podcasters. They couldn't control them.
This next part, I did not like book X or film Y, and here's why. New social media is ruled by anti-fans who would rather talk about the stuff they hate than the stuff they love and delight in dancing on the graves of anyone whose film has flopped. No, here's what happened that got to this point. People weren't like that until you made it that way. You literally made this. People like Mark Waid and Hollywood and these journalists and stuff literally made the problem. Because what happened was it used to be like, hey, I don't like this. And the other person liked it. Okay, well, we'll agree to disagree. We both like this. Let's talk about that instead. Or we'll friendly debate it. No. It went from that to, if you don't like Rey and Star Wars, you are a misogynistic, sexist, racist, whatever bigot. If you don't like this or that, it's because you hate black people. It's because you're racist. It's because everything was some islamophobia, alt-right Yahtzee political agenda bullshit, and not because maybe it just sucked. And since the general audience and general public didn't watch it either or read it either, it must have just sucked to everybody, not just these quote unquote bigots that you see in every room you go into. And you made people turn against you. They delight when your film fails because you're an asshole. Because you have actors and you have directors out there shitting on the fans the entire time, telling them they don't want them. It's for a modern audience. We don't want you old people. We want a new audience. And then when a new audience doesn't appear, what do you do then after you just done, fucked up and insulted everyone who followed you and supported you? It's like you literally, Mark Waid and people like Mark Waid and Heidi McDonald and the media and these, activist-y actors and directors and shit. You made people happy when you failed because you wouldn't listen. But then meanwhile, people did Sonic, listened, and people rewarded them with, you know, even if the movie was good or not, depending on you ask, a lot of people, you know, like or don't like it, but they respect that they listened. And they aren't talking about it the way they talk about other things because they fucking listened.
Even if you're like, this is the thing too, like, and a lot of it is the attitude of the people involved. Like, I mean, you can put out a complete shit movie, but if you're like, you own it and you're just like, yeah, you know, it wasn't that great, but we appreciate people that came, whatever. You're going to have a much easier time, right? People don't like hubris.
You're all, it's not me, it's all you. You're a bunch of biggity. You don't like it. You didn't come because I am, you know, I'm not white, so you're a bigot. It's like, I didn't come because your movie sucked.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, there's no ownership of it. There's no ownership of, and you can say, cause that's the thing. Cause how this lawsuit happened was because there were a handful of comic book pros that were angry that YouTubers were critiquing their work. And they took it as like literal, like, you know, attack, a personal attack. In some cases, you know, maybe it did cross over into personal attacks and it should have been a little more, you know, like attack the work, not whatever. But it went from that to like, we need to get these people out of our space completely. And that's very dangerous, right? Because then you know, comics are for everybody except for the people that agree with us.
Well, no, the problem was too many people. Right? It wasn't that they disagreed. The problem was that a lot of people agreed with people they didn't like. Right, and the majority were not buying it and agreeing with the YouTuber sentiment.
And you started to see the numbers. I think the numbers scared the shit out of a lot of these people because these vetted comic book channels, like they'll do a live stream, and I swear to God, they'll only get like 10 or 20 people watching if they're lucky. But then a YouTuber will do a stream and they'll get like thousands of people. And they didn't know what to do. And then you have people like, you know, Gary from Neurotic, who owned a shop and had a good reputation with a lot of these comic book people, and he owned a shop in San Francisco, for God's sake. And he did in their mind, he did a heel turn, and they just lost their shit. They couldn't. And I think Heidi McDonald's whole thing is YouTubers destroyed the need for her blog.
Well, I think that, and I think the fact that they said they're like, oh, the YouTubers, you know, like Gary did a heel turn. No, he didn't. The stuff they were putting out did a heel turn on the fans, and that was the problem.
Comics turned on the fans, so the fans turned on comics. I mean, that's every industry, and things started getting really weirdly political. 2015, 2016. You know, we've been over this time and time again. So this is battling hate. I guess they did always punch Nazis. Weirdly enough, Trump just passed today that we're going to have a national holiday celebrating the defeat of the Nazis, but. Yeah, we're not gonna mention that anyway. But it's, you know, Roy Thomas. I mean, these guys are legends, but I think they're being fed. I honestly think a lot of these guys are being fed a line of bullshit because they're not online. They don't see what actually went down. They're only getting part of the story from people that are involved, like Mark Waid.
If you see it, he declined to participate in the comic.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Roy Thomas, fan turned pro who went on to become an industry legend. I received quite a bit of Comicsgate beginning last April when it was announced I'd be credited in Deadpool and Wolverine as co-creator of Wolverine. It made me determined to avoid a con where I might find myself in the company of the people who had attacked me.
Yeah, I get it, because you don't want to be attacked. You know, it's one thing to be attacked online. It's not to be attacked to your face. Now, luckily, most people that talk shit online don't actually have the guts to face you. But that doesn't mean someone won't, especially if you're an elderly person. You're over the bullshit.
This is what disgusts me about it too, and I've seen it too. We have seen a lot of older creators bullied into silence by 20-something, 30-something activist-minded. You know, Johnny
it's people like us who don't like anything.
Right. So the Whisper Network, the whole purpose of the Whisper Network, and the vast majority of people in that network were, I'm going to be honest, they're younger women. Women, yeah. The vast majority of them were newer creators, a lot of them, because I think, you know, most people knew to stay the hell away from that kind of shit because it's bullshit. But they were going around and they were basically finding, you know, older creators and, you know, targeting them, people that worked in the industry for years, like Bill Willingham, and they went after him. And so many stories of that. And then if you step out of line, so then you had a lot of these older guys, I think, coming out and basically virtue signaling to keep them away from them, because they're just like, look, I just want to work. And it's like, sorry you found out I'm a Republican, or sorry you found out that I did this or said that or whatever 20 years ago.
Remember when you had to read the statements or sign the statements?
You had to read the damn statement.
You know, about,
oh my God, that was some.
There was different ones. One was about, like, you know, like,
the anti-rape pledge. You had to do that. You had to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to read the statements, post the statements, sign the statements, and everything else. So you weren't part, or you were going to be, if that's your livelihood, of course you're probably going to do it.
Yeah. So this is Ann Nesenti, who, again, I have a lot of respect for these people, right?
Yeah, I know a lot of names on there, people you like. I know.
Yeah. These are people that, I mean, when I was big into reading comics in the 80s and 90s, they were huge back then, and I knew a lot of the names of these people because I would read the letters to the editor. I actually went to the bullpen when I was 17. I got to meet a couple of those editors there. I mean, they were busy. They didn't really have a lot of time for me, but whatever. So I do have a lot of respect for these people. It's just like, I think they're getting a distorted view of what actually happened. And I do blame people like Mark Waid, who were the shit stirrers. Now they're trying to be like, oh, it's my own business. Oh, what the hell happened? No, you weren't.
All those other people who got the internet and suddenly think they're smart,
Yeah, right. So Ann Nesenti says fans would send passionate letters. Yeah, sometimes up to 6 pages, single space. The language and context were more moderate because fans who took the time to write or type their grievances were aware that no one would read their comments if they were nasty or profane. Right. That's true. The internet brought anonymity. Now comments can devolve into profane tirades and no one can call them out. That is true. Since there's no accountability, some feel they can get away with being vulgar and offensive. Yeah, but the
I agree with that. But that, yeah.
The quote unquote pros now are doing it. It was unthinkable.
That's what I'm saying. But don't try to say it's just fans.
It was unthinkable 20, 30 years ago to have somebody like Ann Nesenti out there attacking fans. You know what I'm saying? Like it wouldn't have happened. And now it does happen. And again, I'm not saying it's all of the comic book industry. I think it's a very small portion of the comic book industry.
But they're the loudest portion.
The loudest portion, but they were left unchecked. And again, a lot of them were just younger activist types, and they did so much damage for everybody else. And they will not take responsibility for it.
Well, as I said, of course people, are probably mad and they're just yelling at everyone now because they've been so just everything's been so at them for so long and they weren't listening, and then they've been called names for so long that they're just probably like over it and like, I don't even give a shit. I don't care. I'm just going to say what I want. I'm not going to show respect to people who don't show respect to me. Yeah. That's probably where they're at.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do?
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's probably where it's at.
So Mark Waid again. And battle pros who aren't white dudes like me. I know how much worse they get it. When I was embroiled with the nuisance suit a few years ago that involved Comicsgate.
The nuisance suit.
What the?
Yes, finally. You went to, I'm not going to name names, but you went to a comic publisher who was going to publish somebody you didn't like. And you kind of low-key threatened them, and then you end up with
it wasn't even low-key. It was just like
tortious interference settlement against him. And he lost because of the nuisance suit. You started it because you wouldn't keep your damn mouth shut.
Nuisance, it was Comicsgate. So, but the thing is, to a lot of these people, anybody that's critical at all is Comicsgate. Just like anybody that's critical of the video game industry is Gamergate. It's so ridiculous.
Like younger creators were sharing with him the stuff they've received. It's like, yeah, because I guarantee you, it's like the memes where you're shoveling shit over the fence, and then when the shit gets shoveled back at you, you're like, I'm being attacked. It was likely that.
Yeah, I think Mark Waid's attempt to police the internet.
He's still doing it.
He's still doing it. He's doing it by proxy now. He's not doing it directly. He's doing it by proxy. I think his attempt to police the internet and police comic book fandom threw kerosene on a bonfire, and it just exploded. It was a powder cake. If he had not done it, I'm going to be honest. If Mark Waid had not gotten into it with there are a couple he didn't like, but he really had it in for Richard Meyer. If he wouldn't have gotten into it, and he wouldn't have gotten into it trying to shut it down with like Ethan Van Sciver and all this other shit, I don't think the Comicsgate situation would have blown up nearly.
No, they made their own enemy.
You threw the Red Hood into the toxic waste, Mark, and you made the Joker.
They keep making their behavior keeps directly creating the stuff that they're mad about, because it's just a reaction to their bullshit.
Just and then like they're like, book, basically.
But then they're the innocent victim, and everybody else, everybody else is the real villain all along. But I'll tell you what, I know people that are heroes don't work in whisper networks in the shadows and try to, trigger people into hitting somebody or allegedly, or going around trying to, get dirt on people to get them fired. That's not how heroes behave, is it? No, it's not.
Actually, it was that situation that got us into the kind of content that we're doing now, because we worked in comics. We knew some of the people involved, and we spoke out of that because it was like, this is bullshit. Like, the comic book industry I knew was always about free speech. Even if you didn't agree with people, there have always been beefs in comics, but never escalated to like this ridiculous level. And I think social media did put a huge spotlight on it because you could hide before, and now you can't hide. Like, people knew somebody was a pain in the ass behind the scenes, but they didn't actually see it in real time. Now
fans
they do.
Didn't know. Yeah.
Fans didn't know. It was hidden.
But now you're just like outright just calling people, doing what you do. And then you're triggering people with your bad behavior. And then you're screaming when they fight back.
Oh my God, this is all about Mark Waid. Okay, so this is interesting.
Whole thing is just Mark Waid's bullshit masquerading as
Yes. Okay, so let me tell you what I think is going on here. Speaking of Mark Waid, speaking of Richard Meyer, who apparently doesn't like us very much.
And now he apparently hates us for some reason. We have no fucking idea why. We never did anything to him.
I think
you want to spin, Zach. I don't know what to tell you.
He just went, yeah, he was like, you're a clown, so is your wife. Everybody's a clown. We're all clowns except for me. So I'm like, whatever. Next time you get into it with
But he's allowed to not like things, but no one else is.
I'm gonna tell you what, okay, so we gotta tell you what I think is actually going on. What I think is actually going on here. Because he is name checking Ann Nesenti, and I didn't think it in Larry Hama. Richard Meyer loves Ann Nesenti, and he loves Larry Hama, and he talks about them often. So I think Mark Waid knows the pain. I think this is basically low key. He's sending a message to Richard Meyer like,
or he's trying to he's deliberately trying to be a little asshole,
or just being a little bitch. Yeah, I mean that could be too.
I mean that's a day that ends in Y. Waid being a bitch. That's like every day. So, and
it's like you're neutral. All the bad guy, okay? People want to know. People want to know why we don't get in the weeds with other people and do a lot of streams and stuff with other people. I'm like, everybody hates us, so we didn't do anything. Everybody hates us anyway, so who the fuck cares?
Anyway.
Yeah, we didn't do anything to you.
I was just thinking, with heroes and shadows and stuff, and I'm like, Batman, you have the bat signal, even though he's like, he is the knight. I'm like, my signal would be a big giant middle finger. Somebody Geeky Sparkles. Boom.
Somebody needs fucked up called Geeky. Wait, that sounds bad. That sounds really bad. But yeah, so I mean, look, the history is gonna check, because the people that are in charge of comic book history include people like Mark Waid and Heidi McDonald. And in 10 years, it's gonna be like, oh, the Nazis tried to take over comics. And
they're gonna control the narrative. They're gonna try to control the narrative.
And that's it. And you're not gonna be able to say different. I mean, you're not.
No, you can. And we're gonna. Stick it. Sit and spin, Mark and Heidi and company, because you legitimately caused this entire thing.
We're gonna
get bent.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. That's a teaser with your big middle finger in there, like, Geeky's coming, get bent. Instead of getting dangerous.
That's my trademark. Or my what's that catchphrase? Middle finger symbol, call Geeky Sparkles, get bent.
Get bent.
I can't say what I want to say because I have to say sorry, Mom. That gets old if you keep apologizing to your mom in front of the villains.
It's just sad. Like, oh God, it's just sad. I mean, every time I see something like this, I'm like, yeah, we willingly walked away from the comic book industry in 2015 because it was getting really damn crazy, and I'm like, I don't miss it. Nope. I don't miss it.
Not at all.
Not this and bullshit.
Independents kicking their ass.
Yeah, so pretty much. Let's
wrap it up. Yeah.
We're gonna wrap it up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We'll talk later.
Bye.
For more pop culture news, views, and rants, go to news.clownfishtv.com. That's news.clownfishtv.com.